everyone. It's Tuesday night, so that means it's a legit metaphysical world. So here in New England, I don't know where you're all watching from, we're in the middle of supposedly a nor'easter. So it's mostly been a rainstorm today, though. So I'm really hoping we don't get any of that white crap falling from the sky tonight because I don't know about the rest of you, but I am ready for spring. I'm ready for the warmer weather. I don't want to see any of that when I wake up in the morning. So fingers crossed that it stays away from us. So let's all manifest that the storm goes away. Okay? That sounds like a good plan for me tonight. Tonight, we are welcoming Katharine Rossi, who is a fabulous person who I've known for years. And she is, I want to get this right, so she is the founder of the Fireseed Center for Transformation and the creator of the Peridot Process. So, buddy, bring Katharine in for us. Here she is.
Hi.
Hi, good evening.
Good evening. It's snowing here in Warren, so
it is. Keep it over there, okay? I don't want to see it over here. Now, I don't like the white stuff on my car in the morning. Now, I don't like any of that. I'm ready to see the spring flowers and starting over. And there's just something wonderful about the spring energy, I feel. It's the renewed. It's something's all new and starting over again. And that after a long winter, I feel like that's so important for all of us, especially with the clocks just changed. So we're in light more. So everything, the energy hopefully will lighten up because it's felt pretty heavy the last several weeks. I don't know if you felt it, but.
Definitely.
Yeah. So can you tell us, Katharine, a little bit about the Fireseed Center for Transformation. What is all that about for our audience to learn?
Sure. So, Fireseed Center is actually a name that came to me before I did any of this work at all. It came to me in the spring of 2005. I was at a workshop and I kept getting this name, Fireseed, and doing little doodles, which ended up being the logo for the business. And it was before I did any shamanic work or any energy medicine work. And it's interesting to think about my path here, even to just talking to you today, has been one that has been totally spirit-led and just following the signs. And in doing that, I made a drum. And at the time I was pretty hardcore vegan. Mm-hmm. And there was a drum making workshop and it was like, I have to take it. I don't know why, but I need to make a drum. And the drum sat there for a while. And a few months later, I saw a workshop at All That Matters in Wakefield, Rhode Island, that was Introduction to Shamanism. And had no idea what a shaman was or did, but I felt drawn to take that class and I did, and it totally changed my life. And that's where I met my colleague, Paul DeSegna. We were in the same intro class and, our paths crossed and we did a lot of good work together for over 11 years.
Yeah, Paul is fabulous.
He is great. Yeah. And so it's almost like I felt like I was following breadcrumbs.
Okay.
And Fireseed was one of the breadcrumbs. And in learning shamanism and applied shamanism, I learned how to do shamanic journeying, which is basically connecting with spirit with the help of a sonic driver, with the help of a drum, to go into non-ordinary reality, to connect with compassionate beings. And so through my work in doing that, I decided this thing called Fireseed, I should connect with it and see what it is. Yeah. And so I journeyed to the spirit of Fireseed and did that for a number of years, about 5 years. And I just kept going back and I was receiving teachings and information.
So Fireseed is actually a spirit you connected with from the other side.
Yep.
Okay. All right.
And originally my business was just under my name. I didn't use the name Fireseed. And then finally I decided to do that. And then when I looked back on all the journeys I had done, I realized that there was a pattern to the way spirit was working with me. And so some of it was the spirit of the business, the spirit of Fireseed. There were land spirits that were working with me to help me develop and grow my practice. There was the energetic container of the business, right? The energy field that I worked in. And so when I started to see all these components, I began to break it down into its essential elements and developed Peridot Process. And I began to teach people how to connect with the spirit of the idea that they had and work with that spirit to co-create their business or project or whatever it was. And, working with the spirits of the land, creating the energetic container to hold that so that they could work at optimal levels of their being and what was also best for the spirit of the idea. So that's kind of how all that came about.
I want to go over just a couple of things because a lot of people in our audience may not get a lot of what we were just talking about. When you talk about using the drum to connect to Fireseed, so in order, if I'm understanding this right, in order to make that connection to the spirits on the other side or the other realm, whatever you want to call it, you believe we need to have some kind of I think you said a sonic instrument.
A sonic driver, right?
So you need something like that in order to make that connection?
It's a way of making connection.
Okay.
And so using the drum is a traditional way that shamans would move into an altered state of consciousness.
Okay.
And the drum beat is typically 4 beats per second. So that induces the theta brainwaves, which is just before delta, just before sleep.
Yeah.
And so that it is a trance-like state. And you could use a drum or a rattle or some other instrument to do that steady beat. It's not necessary. There are other ways to move into a trance-like state. So you think of like whirling dervishes, right? They use movement to move into a trance state.
Okay.
The hypnotic state, so words and the energy behind the words can move you into that state of being.
And when you're in that state, is that where spirit resides?
So it's been interesting how it has shifted. And I've noticed, like in myself, like the more I do it, the less I need something else to be able to connect with spirit, because it's right here, right? It's like right here. It's all around.
Yeah, right.
And it's not like I have to really go anywhere. Whereas in the beginning, I did. It was just I learned this process and I followed it. And I noticed too when I would facilitate like shamanic journey groups, and I would start to tell people this is what we're going to journey on. They would already start journeying before I even started to drum.
And what do you mean journeying?
So shamanic journeying is that process of moving from ordinary reality or the realm of the seen into non-ordinary reality or the realm of the unseen, which is the world of spirit, which is right next to or infused with our own world of everything that we can see.
Okay. So you believe, and I don't want to put words into your mouth, but you believe like I do, because I'm also a paranormal investigator. And people ask me all the time, well, is this place haunted? Is that place haunted? And I always usually say to them, they're around us all over the place. They don't all reside in the house down the street. Like, you know, they're not just in that haunted house. They're everywhere, every day. They're all around you. And that may freak you out because it may be easier to think, oh, they're just in that house over there.
Mhm.
No, spirits around us everywhere. Why would you think they're contained to a house?
Right.
You don't have to go to a haunted place to make contact with spirit. I think if you just quiet your mind and open it,
Mm-hmm.
they can contact you.
Yep.
I really believe that. So that's similar to what you believe, that they're all here, and you've developed these skills that you can contact specific ones.
So,
Fireseed.
yes.
Okay. Now, do you believe we all have specific spirits like you do at Fireseed that are on our journey and we can make contact with to help us on this side?
Mm-hmm.
Really?
Why not?
This is true.
So, I mean, we encounter people like that. So it's whether they're in a body or not in a body.
So do you think Fireseed was ever on this side as this? Or do you think they've always been in that realm?
Well, I don't know that it was a person.
Okay.
My sense is, so if you think about an idea, right? So like say you have an idea of a project or something that you want to do. And I don't know if you've ever had this experience. I have, where an idea comes, right? And I'll sit with it for a little while and be like, oh, that's a good idea. And I could take it and develop it further, or I could let it go. And then I'll start to see all these other people are doing the same. I was like, oh, I had that idea. And it was just like something that popped in the head or something. And sometimes like an idea or something that wants to come into form is so big that it goes to different people to come to fruition. That I believe that. And so Fireseed was an idea. It was an idea that came, and it's one that's still developing and growing and I'm developing and growing with it. And so it's an interesting partnership that happens.
So how has it changed over the years as it's developing? How has it changed?
So it used to appear to me as a tree with like autumn-like leaves.
Okay.
And there were times when I would connect with it and it would just be in the dark, right? And there was no light around it. And then after, a year or two, it began to move into the light. And so the other thing is, you have to remember that the way spirit communicates with us is through symbol and metaphor.
Okay.
And so you have to kind of interpret what's being shown or told to you or what you're hearing.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, it meant that it was becoming more visible, more known. And then there were times when the energy of it was almost like it was going through a regeneration process.
Mm-hmm.
And so it would catch fire and burn to the ground and just be ash. And sometimes at first I was like, oh no, like is my whole business going to disappear?
Right.
And then it would rise like a phoenix. It would become stronger. It would grow into that tree again. And so I learned that, okay, when that happens, that usually means some type of growth is happening. And so whether it's growth in the business or growth in myself, incorporating new programs or things that I've learned, techniques, skills, things like that. And so it's been kind of this evolutionary process.
So as Fireseed has transformed, right? Like you said, caught on fire, which I think I would have got a little unsettled by that. It ended up in ash and then re-energized and grew again. Was that similar to your journey here? Were you kind of going through the same thing? Not necessarily catching on fire, but not having a great time and had to re-energize and reinvent yourself. Was the path similar?
It was. And so it was really interesting how the spirit of Fireseed was informing me as I was informing it. So it's an interesting relationship, and it's a different way of working.
Oh, absolutely.
Because, the other thing is everything is alive and has spirit. And so why wouldn't your business have that too? Right? So like your therapy practice, in a sense, is its own entity, it's its own being, and has its own spirit. People feel that when they come into the space, right? It's the way you decorate it, it's the energy that you bring,
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, you're right. I never thought of it that way. And you can walk into a room and feel the energy.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it happens to me all the time. I can, something just happened here. You know what I mean? You can feel different energies in rooms. And I never thought of it because of the energy I'm feeling. Well, that actually makes it a being. Like it's, I never made that connection for myself. You're right. That's incredible. So as you're going on these journeys, Katharine, though, I would assume it's a lot like when I was getting Reiki trained, like you have to learn the difference between your intuition and your spirituality side and your ego. Like there must be like some kind of, pull there that you have to kind of work through, correct?
Yeah. So to me, when I think about ego, it's sort of that being grandiose, right? And like I'm so great, look what I can do. And I think anytime we're working with spirit, humility is so important.
Yes.
And that moves into the concept of power. And when we're working with spirit has a particular type of power that it can lend to us or work through us. Like when you do Reiki, you're channeling, universal energy, right? And even though you are an aspect of universal energy, there is a stream of energy that's coming through you when you're doing Reiki. And so you have to be careful not to mistake the universal energy as completely your own.
Yes.
Because when you do that, then you are feeding your ego.
Yes. Yes. No, absolutely. Absolutely.
And I've seen when people do that, they eventually lose power. They can't hold it.
What do you mean they lose power?
Like the spirit will stop coming to them.
Really?
Well, it's a misuse of power, of energy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. It's almost as if, so, Reiki, for example, I always think, to me, it always comes down through my head and out my heart and my hands.
Yeah, me too. So, it comes down through your crown, out. Yep. Yeah.
And if I'm siphoning that off, right, to use for myself, as opposed to receiving that benefit, then that is a misuse of the energy. My understanding is a misuse of that energy and that feeding of the ego.
Yes. Yes.
Even though with Reiki, like you do derive benefit from being in that energy field. And it would be the same with when Paul and I would do the shamanic drum healings. Because you're in the energy field of one of healing, and with the sound and the resonance, you're sort of in that soup of it or that pool of it, right? So as a practitioner, you're receiving the benefit of that, as are the participants.
What was it like? Because you and Paul did the shamanic drumming at my office, which was fabulous. And it was such a powerful experience. It really was. That was one of the first experiences my husband had in the spiritual realm
Mm.
that really had a profound impact on him. Like
Oh,
just
thank
profound.
you.
He was kind of on the fence
Yeah.
about all my stuff, kind of thought I was a
You
little crazy.
dragged me here. Yeah.
Basically, yeah, kind of. And then had such a profound experience of feeling like he was flying during it.
Mm.
Like it was just amazing. And he's like, what on earth was that? What was that, Dale? I'm like, here we go. This is what it is. But what does that do? So it was profound for us, but what does that do for you as you're in that healing energy? And are you channeling spirit during that time to help heal us all during the shamanic drumming also?
Yes. So it's an interesting process because it's different than Reiki.
Mm-hmm.
Because in the shamanic drum healing, what you're doing is you're doing a multiple merge. So you're moving your personal energy aside, right? So that's like moving the ego aside
Yeah.
and becoming a clear channel for spirit to work through you. And in those drum healings, we're doing soul retrieval, we're doing power retrieval, we're removing energetic interference, we're moving energy in and out.
Mm-hmm.
And even though it looks like whoever's doing it is physically doing it, in a sense we are. It's almost like we're the vehicle, but we're not the driver.
Okay.
Because spirit is driving and the car is full of spirit, of different spirits, right, who are helping to do that work.
Yeah.
But the physicality of it, like I have to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's moving the drum, it's things like that, but it's also listening and paying attention and following that guidance.
Yeah. So the car that's full with spirit, are they always the same spirits that help you and Paul when you do it, or is it different spirits all the time that come across?
For me, it was always the same ones because I had developed a relationship. It was like developing a working relationship.
Okay.
And they each had specific things that they focused on.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Like what? What would they focus on? This is fascinating.
So like there was one, like I would have a teacher or a guide for power retrievals. So that teacher would do that. There would be another one for soul retrievals. There would be one that would clear blocks, energetic blocks.
Mm-hmm.
Trying to think what else. Various rays of light too. So I had a ray channeling guide that I would merge with, and the rays of light would come through. And then you have to remember that we're also working with sound and resonance because of the drum and the rattles and the bowls. And so those had their own particular spirits too that would come through.
Like the instruments would have their own spirits that would come with them?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
So the room was pretty full.
Yes, it was. That car was very full. You were kidding. That office was very full. Okay.
Yeah.
Can you talk about a little bit with our audience about what the retrievals are, like the power retrieval and the soul? Like, what is that? Sure. What happens?
So power retrieval and soul retrieval are pretty much linked together in a sense. So from the shamanic point of view, anytime there is some type of trauma, or if we disown aspects of ourselves, there can be soul loss. So soul loss can also happen when we're in a car accident, right? And we're in a state of shock. Like we're disoriented. We don't know where we are, what's going on.
Yeah.
And so usually what happens is the pain is so great that a part of the self leaves in order to protect itself. And then oftentimes it'll naturally come back on its own. Like when the person comes to, they're not disoriented anymore. You know, they can speak about what happened with the car accident. And so the soul part came back. Sometimes it doesn't. And so I've worked a lot in the field of domestic violence and sexual assault, where you have people who have experienced abuse and they see it happening to them, but they're like in the corner. Yeah. So that's temporary soul loss, right? It's too much, can't handle it. And so it's that protective mechanism. They leave and then they come back into their body. Well, sometimes people don't come back and they lose track of those aspects of themselves and that vital life energy. And when we don't have access to that, there are symptoms that occur. So if someone is depressed or anxious, that can be an indication of soul loss and power loss. If they have an inability to get well, so like chronic illness is a symptom as well. And you have to remember too, that soul part holds a particular energy that the person is without, right? And so from the shamanic point of view, power is life force energy.
Okay.
And we need that in order to be healthy and well. And so in power retrievals and soul retrievals, what I'm doing is working with my guides to go and retrieve those aspects of the self that are ready to come back. And then they're reintroduced into the person's body and energy field. And so in the drum healings, usually it would be through the drum. And so it would actually be collected in the drum. And then typically we'd take the drum, like if we had a drum, and blow it into the person. So that they can integrate it.
Can you feel when you've retrieved a soul as you're doing the shamanic drumming? Can you tell when it's time to like blow it back into the person?
Yeah, for me, generally, it's like this fullness that comes. And, you know, I'm paying attention like, okay, did we get all the parts? Is it all here? Does it want to come back? Because you don't want to reintroduce something or re-traumatize the person.
Right.
So, yeah.
Okay, I have so many questions about this.
Okay.
This is so cool. This is so right up my alley tonight. It really is. Okay, so where do the soul pieces go?
So there's lots of places where they can go. So it's interesting how you were talking about spirits being all over the place, right? Yeah. So we can leave soul parts in the places where we experience trauma. Right.
So in order to retrieve them, do we have to go back to that place to get them back?
Sometimes, yeah.
You do?
Yeah.
So if it's a car accident, you actually have to go back to the place the accident was?
If the soul part has stayed there. Sometimes it'll move out someplace else.
What about like if you're a child and you were abused as a child and some of your pieces are back there, like back in time?
Mm-hmm.
Can you go back and retrieve them from that?
Yes. And so, I'm sorry?
You can.
Yes. And so that's where hypnosis is really helpful.
Okay.
And so part of the work that I do, the one-on-one work, is hypnosis. And what we do is we follow memory that's held in the body. So like your body is like a map of everything that you've experienced. Mm-hmm. It's the access point. It's the doorway. Yeah. And so oftentimes, you know, we'll follow a feeling and it'll be an age regression. So we'll go back to a situation where the trauma occurred or where the incident occurred. And the person has the opportunity to, in a sense, to be their own shaman and do the soul retrieval on their own with guidance. And it's a really powerful process. It's very empowering for the person. So they get to tell their younger self what they needed to hear at that time.
Yeah.
And then the question becomes, do you want to bring this part back with you? And does the part want to come back? And then also, what are the gifts that this soul part has? And so, usually it's innocence or playfulness, or, she's really good at, drawing. And so that's also the energy that comes back to the person. And it's all about coming into wholeness.
Yeah. Now, is that what the basis of shamanism is? Is the belief that we need to be whole? Is that something that shamans try to achieve before we pass on to the other side, is to be as completely whole as we can be?
I think so, yeah. And I mean, I think that, the work that you and I both do is about that. And It's about coming into right relationship with our power, and really understanding our experience. And when you think about that, like in the larger context, when we do that, we also add to the collective consciousness, right?
How so?
Being able to, because the wisdom that we develop becomes part of the collective wisdom that we all have that ability to tap into. And it's a way for humanity to understand, to inform and understand itself. If you want to talk on a spirit realm, the spirit of humanity is learning and growing and developing as well. Let's hope so.
Fingers crossed. Have you ever had, I don't know, do you call them clients or I don't know, I call them clients. Have you ever had a process of doing a soul retrieval with someone, taking them all the way back to their childhood? Have you actually seen a difference in them once they did the soul retrieval? What did that look like for you?
So typically, and they report this, their demeanor, so first of all, their demeanor changes. And the other thing that's really amazing too is the energy in the room shifts.
Really?
Yeah, it's like tingly, like you can feel it. And they feel lighter. Like there's that, like a heaviness or a weight has been removed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, because a piece of their trauma has been healed.
Right.
You
have more energy.
Yeah. And people don't understand how long trauma can hold on to you and how it definitely shapes how you see everything.
Oh, yeah.
That's just fascinating. That really is. And I didn't realize that you also use hypnosis in your work. So besides doing the soul and the power retrieval, what else do you use the hypnosis for?
So I use the hypnosis to remove energetic blocks.
Okay, can you talk a little bit about what that is? Is that related to trauma also?
It can be. So energetic interference or energetic blocks, it's energy that's not ours. And on some level, we allowed it in. So when there's soul loss and power loss, there's a vacuum, right? There's space. And sometimes something will come in to fill that space. And it could be a discarnate spirit, or it could just be some type of energy. And typically it comes in to help the person. So, for example, or there's some type of commonality that draws that energy to the person. So, for example, I worked with someone who, as a child, she was walking on the beach and feeling very lonely. And so this spirit came in and attached itself to her because it knew what loneliness was and didn't want her to feel lonely. And in turn, it didn't feel lonely either because it was attached to her. And then what happens is we grow up, we go about our lives, we, adapt to whatever changes happen in our lives, and we forget about it, right? Or we lose track of what could have happened. And then it's when we start to make changes in our lives or feel uncomfortable, like something's not quite right, that's when we bump up against those blocks and we feel them, right? I
Yeah.
want to do this, but I can't seem to get past, my fear, or I can't seem to get past this feeling of being alone, even though I have all these friends. I have friends and family, but I still feel alone.
Alone. Yep.
And so in the hypnosis, we'll go into that feeling of being alone. And in this session, we discovered that it was a spirit that once had a body that attached itself to her as a little girl. And then the person has a choice. They can keep that. They can keep that spirit with them, or they can let it go. And oftentimes they're ready to let it go because it's getting in the way. And then we do processes where we're helping that spirit, understand its own experience and then move on its evolutionary path, always from a place of compassion and love, right?
Yeah.
And then do the releasement of that spirit so that it moves into the light, and then fill in the space with the person's own life energy. And that too, people feel lighter and their energy is brighter. And yeah.
But if that person had something attached to it since it was a little girl, so they wouldn't feel lonely, right? Mm-hmm. Why, when they grew up, why did they still feel lonely if that thing was still attached to them?
Because it was the loneliness of the spirit that was attached to them that they kept feeling. It wasn't there.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So if someone has an emotion that they can't process, and this happens a lot with grief.
Yeah.
Like a lot of times we'll take on other people's grief to try to help them feel better. Yeah. But we can't process somebody else's emotions. And you see it with little kids too. Like if a parent is depressed or really sad
or anxious,
the child will take some of that on.
Yes.
So that the parent will feel better because that's their safety person, right? That's the person who's supposed to be taking care of them.
Right.
Yeah. And then you grow up and you forget that you're carrying that usually until you're an adult.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why working in the realm of spirit is so helpful, and working with energy helps us be able to identify something that we can't necessarily see.
Right.
Some people do, but we feel it.
Yeah. Now, when you helped that girl through hypnosis find that spirit that was attached,
mm-hmm.
As a child, could you actually see that spirit that was attached, or could you just felt that something was attached to her?
Well, in the hypnosis that I do, she's telling me what she's experiencing. So she's talking to me and I'm guiding her through that. So I'm asking a lot of questions. And she's the one who identified. And sometimes I can see it, sometimes I can't.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, my specialty, so to speak, is the energetic interference, like being able to identify that, and also working on unraveling curse lines too. So I've done a lot of that in my work as well.
So you believe this is a timely question for me. We did a recent with my paranormal group. We did a recent investigation, and I think something attached to me and came home with me.
Yep.
And I've been trying for about 3 weeks to get rid of it. In fact, our puppy got so almost obsessed with barking every single night at the same time for hours on end at nothing. Like it went on for weeks, and I swear he was seeing something too.
Mm-hmm.
You know, how would I go about trying to release whatever decided to come home with me? Because when we do investigations, I always think I'm very protected, and and I'm safe, and I make sure I tell the energy they're not allowed to come with me. You have
Right.
to stay here and all that good stuff. But I happened to do a pendulum session that night, which was very powerful, and started acting up energy in the room and everything. Like things were moving and everything, and I think we kind of upset whatever energy was there. And
Mm-hmm.
I think because I was doing the pendulum and communicating, it opens that communication with it. I think it came to me.
Mm-hmm.
So how do I get rid of it?
Okay. So there was a question that came through the thing asking if all attachments are negative.
Mm-hmm.
And they're not necessarily. Sometimes they are spirits that were once in a body, so they were once people.
Yeah.
And they're just trying to help the other person. And that's not necessarily negative. And there's always an agreement on our part to let something in. And so that agreement could be conscious or subconscious.
Okay.
Right. And so to look at, there might have been some unconscious agreement for you to let this entity attach to you.
Mm-hmm.
My suggestion would be, where do you feel it? So let me ask you this. Where do you feel it in your body?
In my head.
Okay. And if you were to tune into it, where in your head do you feel it?
This is going to sound crazy. Okay.
Look at where we are.
This is true. Look who I'm talking to. Come on.
Talk to me.
Good point. Okay. Never mind. When we were doing the pendulum session, it was on the anniversary of a fire in this place. And we didn't know that. Okay. When we were doing the pendulum session. And immediately after the session ended, and for that entire night, my whole sinus just filled up with stuff. Like I blew my nose like I've never before. Like it was a lot of stuff coming out of my sinuses. And since then, and then it went away like the next morning. But since then, I've had a cold and my sinuses, I can't shake. I can't shake it. So
Okay.
it feels like it's all right in here.
Mm-hmm.
It feels like almost whatever attached to me, whoever we were talking to that night, he was at the fire and he wants me to know what it felt like for him. That's what it feels like for me.
Okay. So do you feel like that's complete? Like you have a full understanding?
As soon as you ask me that question, I have to say no.
Okay.
I'm still missing something now.
So actually what's jumping up for me is for you to maybe do some automatic writing and allow this spirit to have a voice.
That's a good idea. That's
and
a really good idea.
You can, call in your protection when you do that.
Yeah.
And then I was in a workshop with Elizabeth Gilbert, who, wrote Eat, Pray, Love and things. Mm-hmm. And she had us do this exercise, which I use all the time, and I tell people to do it, and it's really great. And so it's like writing a letter. So my suggestion would be to connect with this spirit and have paper and pen and just start, Dear Dale. this is the spirit in your head, and I want you to know, and then just write. And I can send that to you if you want me to.
Yeah. And just see what comes out.
And see what comes up.
Hmm.
And maybe that's the thing, like it needs a voice, right? It needs to have its story told. And there's a lot of power in telling our stories, right? We tell our stories all the time.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I had an experience. I had an office over on Waterman Street in Providence. It was on the third floor of this Victorian building. Used to be the servants' quarters of the house. It was like this old house.
Oh, it must have been very cool.
It was neat, except for all the stairs. But I was clearing one of the side rooms, and so I was drumming, and I felt this weird sensation that I had never felt before. And it was if there was a line of spirits behind me that were moving through my back and abdomen, like they were passing through me. And there were all these emotions that came up. And at first I was like a little freaked out, you know?
Yeah.
But I was like, all right. I always just tell myself, just keep drumming, you know? So I kept drumming. And what I realized afterwards, that in order for them to move on, they needed that emotion felt. And so I was just sort of that vehicle for it, right? I didn't have to understand it. I didn't have to figure out, you know, what it was or who it was, but they needed that in order to be able to move on.
So you were like kind of their witness. You had to be their witness for their emotions.
Yeah.
Wow.
And think about that too, Dale, like the work that you do, you witness people's experiences all the time. Like you're natural. That's the natural thing that you do.
No, that's true.
And so it would make sense that this spirit would be attracted to you, because that's the work that you do.
Yeah, I hear people's stories all the time, and I validate it all the time, every day. That's what I do.
Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. Thank you, Katharine. That's amazing. I'm definitely gonna do that automatic writing and see what comes out. And I'll let you know how it works out.
Yeah.
I'll let everyone on the show know how it works out, because I have to do that now. I have to try to figure out, you know, how I can give whoever's attached to me a voice. I love that idea. I really do.
Yeah.
And it doesn't, and it's funny, you know, you say, look where we are. Yeah, thank God, because some of these things you can't talk to with regular people. They think you are, you know, kind of crazy. But things like this excite me, because I like to, it doesn't freak me out at all. Like doing investigations doesn't freak me out at all. You know, I mean, I've been touched, my hair's been pulled, all that kind of stuff. It never freaks me out. I say to people all the time, you know, they're people without bodies. That's all. You know, there's nothing else. You know, well, aren't you afraid, you know, of demons and stuff? I said, you know, it's not like it is in Hollywood. You know, it's not like that. Trust me, it's really not like that.
And in my experience, the nastier something is, the more in pain it is.
Ooh, yeah.
You know, the more that it's hurting.
So have you felt like a really nasty spirit in some of your work?
Yeah, I've actually channeled. So sometimes I channel spirits, people who have passed.
Okay.
And
I know that about you, Katharine.
I'm like a hidden gem.
You just do everything. My goodness, you are a hidden gem.
I can't whistle though. That's the only thing.
I can't snap my fingers, so you know, it's something.
We all have our problems. Yeah, and so it was somebody's mother, and she was so nasty. And you know, sometimes you can do something, and sometimes you can't.
Yeah,
you know?
Yeah. So how did you deal with being in that kind of nasty energy as you're channeling her?
So because of the way that I learned to channel, my personal energy was out of the way. So it wasn't affected.
Yeah. Okay. So how often do you actually channel? Like, do you do it specifically for people? Do they come in and ask you, like, I want to talk to someone, and you do it that way? Or does it just happen when it happens?
Well, it's more controlled now. Before I learned how to do it, it just happened all the time.
Did it?
And yeah, and I was kind of a natural at it. But
Okay.
then I realized that part of that was because I was dissociated. I wasn't in my body. And so that left that vacuum, right?
Mhm.
Space
Yeah.
for something else to come in. And then I realized that was a bit of a problem. And the problem was that I didn't want to be me. And so I did a lot of self work,
Mm-hmm.
actually come back into my body and manage my energy in a way that was healthy.
Mm-hmm.
And so with that meant that the spontaneous channeling didn't happen, in the same way. But
Were
I
you
still get downloads, and I will channel for people in sessions.
were you very young when you first started channeling? When you first started receiving messages?
Um, I wasn't really aware of it until I was like in my 20s.
Okay.
So I don't really know when it started.
Mm-hmm.
But the dissociation started like around 3 years old.
So pretty young.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, I've had, I guess, channeling experiences when I've done Reiki and stuff, or sometimes I'll just feel something and
Mhm.
I just say it. I rarely remember my messages that I give to people. Like,
Yeah.
they'll say to me, "Well, Dale, remember when you said this?" And I'm like, honestly, no, I don't. I don't remember when I said that to you. And they look at me like I'm lying. I'm like, it wasn't my message.
Right.
It was for you. So why would I remember what I said? No, it didn't mean anything to me. It was just words. And half the time it doesn't even make sense to me because they're not
Mhm.
my message. So
Yeah.
do you find that too? Like, a lot of times you don't remember what you say to people?
Yeah, I find that too. And for me, it's because I'm usually in an altered state of consciousness. So I don't
Okay.
remember. And it's funny because I'll be teaching or leading a group or something, and I'll channel something, and I'll know, I'm talking like I'm talking to you, and someone will say, "Can you repeat that?" It's like, no, I can't.
No.
I can
No.
give you the gist of it, but it
Yeah.
won't be the same delivery. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, what do you mean an altered state, Catherine? What kind of a mindset do you have to get in to open yourself up to receiving I like how you said the downloads. I think
Yeah.
that's an interesting way of thinking of it.
Well, it's like you have, a foot in both worlds, right? You have uh, a foot in the seen and a foot in the unseen. So you're
Yeah.
kind of in both. You're in that middle place. And so you're allowing that flow of energy, right, through your words to come through, but you're not necessarily fixated or focused on what is being said.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have a spirit guide, one in particular that helps you channel?
Mm-hmm.
You
I
do.
do.
So you have someone that like kind of protects you to make sure that you're
Yeah.
okay as you're kind of in between both worlds.
Yeah. And particularly if I'm channeling someone who has passed.
What do you mean if you're channeling?
Well, just because like it could decide not to leave. It could
True.
stay. You could take it home.
True. True. They
Need
can be
a
like that.
purpose,
Yes. Yeah. Okay. All right.
Oh, I'm just teasing you.
Yeah, I never knew you were a channeler too. That's really fascinating for me.
Yeah.
But you said, especially if it's somebody who do you channel people that are still on this side?
Who are alive?
Yeah.
No.
No. Okay. Or do you channel like Fireseed? Would he come through and have a message for somebody?
I can. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Wow. I would love to find out like who my person is on the other side that's been guiding me, because I've been saying most of my life, like, I know I'm not alone on this journey. You know how you
Mhm.
just know? You know, I just know everything I've been through in my life, I'm not alone. Something has been
Mhm.
there at my darkest moments and at my brightest. Like, something has helped me get to the point I am here today.
Mhm.
And I've always called them angels, and maybe that's what they are to me. You know, I've always said I've never been alone here, but I would love to really connect with whoever has been on this journey with me,
Mm.
you know? So maybe I need to talk to you a little bit more and figure out how to do that.
Or you can come to Journey Group. We actually have one this Friday. I run a free shamanic journey group on the third Friday of the month on Zoom. It's at 7.
And what happens during that?
So in that group, if people don't know how to journey, I just give you the Cliff Notes version of it.
Yeah.
And then so in that, I draw an oracle card and use that as the basis for a suggestion to journey on.
Okay.
And then I drum. We do a live drum, and we journey. And then people write it down, and then they go into breakout rooms and share their journey, and then we come back in the larger group. It's a really
Oh,
nice community. It's a good practice group.
yeah.
I've been running that group since 2009. So it's been a
Wow.
while. I don't know how many years that is, but
Wow. That's amazing. We only, believe it or not, we only have a couple, like 3 minutes left. It went by so
wow,
fast with you.
it
I know,
did.
Catherine, you and I could talk about this all
We
night
talk
long. Yeah,
forever.
gosh, you're going to have to come back on. What do you see? And this is probably a short version of this long answer, I'm sure. Do you see hope for the world as we're going right now? Or do you see concern?
I see both, but mostly hope. I believe, and what I've been connecting with and what I've been seeing is that we are in a big process of change
Mm-hmm.
and in a process of evolutionary change. And my friends and I, we've done journeys 7 generations ahead, and we keep being told it's okay, we're good. And part of that process of change means that structures and the way that we have built our lives in our society need to crumble and fall. And then from there, we can rebuild.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're in that destruction phase or the beginning of it. And we see that with institutions that are no longer working. They're no longer serving people, and they need to fall apart
Mm-hmm.
so that something new and better can be built from that.
Yeah.
And I don't think that I will see it in my lifetime, which makes me a little sad. But I also am happy to be part of that change and am motivated to do what I can to help move it along.
And kind
Because,
of prepare the way
yeah.
for it to come.
Mm-hmm.
It has been such a journey. It has been such a pleasant journey for me to have you on tonight, Catherine. This has been fabulous. I can't thank you enough. Definitely, I wasn't kidding. I definitely want to bring you back on. You know, maybe you and Paul together, that would be fabulous. We could
That's
have a show,
always
the
good.
three of
Yeah.
us. But I am definitely going to do that writing, that automated, automated,
Automatic writing. Yeah.
automatic writing. I'm going to do it. I'm going to let you know how it comes out.
Yes.
It has to help. It has to help give this person the voice that he needs. Absolutely. Everyone who joined us tonight, thank you so much for joining us. Next Tuesday night, we're going to have the live card reading. So come back and join us again and have a fabulous week. And namaste.